I'm the organizer for System Change, Not Climate Change, a socialist organization in North America, and I'm on the steering committee, the North American steering committee for System Change, Not Climate Change. I'm also chair of the Environmental Working Committee for Dallas Movement. We have invited you here because this is a very important day. ExxonMobil is having its annual shareholders meeting where they talk about their wonderful profits and how glorious ExxonMobil is and what a successful model of business it represents to the United States and to the world. But we're here to tell the truth. They may be very successful, but it's not the cancer that is very successful and how it consumes its host. We are here to proclaim the crimes that ExxonMobil has been guilty, crimes against humanity and crimes against the planet. And that they demand that we move from fossil fuels as quickly as possible. According to the IPCC, the Western countries have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 by 30%. 30% by 2020. The Western industrialized nations have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. By 2050, the West needs to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 95% if we are to avoid the most cataclysmic results of runaway global warming and climate change. This means that it cannot be business as usual. It means that we cannot have the fossil fuel industry controlling local, state, national, and international government. We have to drastically get off the fossil fuels immediately. The transition as rapidly as possible into sustainable energy sources, wind, solar, thermal, wave, This is not an ideological issue. This is a scientific issue. And this is a human rights issue. It is a justice issue. The future of our children and their children, as well as the ecosphere of this planet, and at least up to 60% of species that could be lost to runaway global climate change. We have to act. But it is ExxonMobil and other fossil fuel industries like them that have lied to the public. Consciously have chosen to spread misinformation to the public here and across the world, saying that global warming is not real. It's not caused by human activities. That we can survive it, we can adapt. There is no adaptation to the kind of temperature increases that we are in store of if we do not act quickly. Even 2 degrees increase in the surface temperature of the planet would be catastrophic. But we could be looking at much higher temperature increases if we do nothing. So we're here to call accountability on ExxonMobil and the other oil and gas companies who are raping and pillaging our planet, our communities, our families, and our future in the planet. So I want to introduce our next speaker. The very Honorable Lon Burnam, who has served the Texas House of Representatives for a very long time, since the late 90s, I believe. And he also was the director of the Dallas Peace Center for 10 years. Lon Burnam.
All right. Thank you, Gary. As Gary said, I'm Lon Burnam. I'm a state representative from Fort Worth, and I serve on the House Energy Resources Committee. And I'm here today, one more time, to call out ExxonMobil for their crimes against humanity, for their crimes against the planet, for their destructive behavior. Now, we all know how the model works. Major corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, it's in their job description to put profit before people. But it's in the government's job description to put people before profit. And they own the friggin' government. They frack the heck out of this because they are able to control the political process in this country. And they do. You know, I was telling the reporter earlier, there's not a whole lot new that can be said about the crimes of ExxonMobil. I've been boycotting them since the Valdez accident. You can follow that sordid history since that accident of their misbehavior throughout that particular specific incident. It is an example of what they do over and over and over again to maximize their profits at the expense of the planet, of the expense of the people that live here. I encourage everybody once again to always boycott ExxonMobil. There are 3 occasions in which I haven't. 2 of them I was about to run out of gas and I couldn't find any other place to buy gas. But I'm also a forced client of theirs in that because the way we do not regulate the oil and gas industry in this state, I am forced into a pool with my neighbors in Fort Worth to sell my natural gas to somebody. It happened to be XTO. Well, ExxonMobil, with its excess profits, bought out XTO. So from going to work to doing business with a relatively responsible corporation, home-owned in Fort Worth, I'm now forced to do business with the most irresponsible corporate entity in the planet. It's way past time for people like this to not be making the exorbitant salaries and getting the exorbitant benefits they get because they do not run their corporations in the interest of anybody but themselves. And this needs to be stopped. So let's start not with just arrest ExxonMobil, but let's arrest Rex Tillerson. Thank you very much for being here.
Now that's a real Texas politician. Okay, our next speaker will be Molly Wilk, who represents Dallas Sierra Club, and a longtime fabulous activist here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Thank you all for being here. The Sierra Club has been working, trying to get more accountability on environmental issues through shareholder action. So I'll be going into the meeting later, and there's a resolution in there on climate change. And it's important for us to do all that we can. There has been so much harm done and continuing to be done by ExxonMobil for them to make their profit. And the destruction that's left behind is ever expanding. They will have a slideshow. They will have a fantastic presentation in there. They always get to give their version of how wonderful they are to their shareholders. And they will glorify how they will be fracking the world. And they already are. And they're talking about all these wonderful light oil and gas exploration sites around the planet where we know that people have been and will continue to be and will increasingly be damaged by the air and water pollution wherever this happens. And their rights will be completely ignored, whether it's here in the United States where they're fracking on people's property who don't want it and who suffer the ill effects, or in Africa or wherever else they go. And the thing is, we know about that. The reason we're here is we know what's happening. But the reason they're getting away with so much of this, as Lon says, the political system is rigged in their favor. And so we need to get more people involved in this. Somehow we need to get the word out about the truth of all the harm that's being caused by this. I mean, we're suffering climate chaos already, and it's only going to be getting worse. But there's so few people who actually know the truth. There's a poll after poll done showing that people are still overwhelmingly in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline, despite the fact we see, well, the Mayflower got a fair amount of coverage for a while, but people didn't really understand what that was. They didn't know that the booms weren't really doing any good. It was kind of for show, and people just don't know the facts. So they get the the mainstream media account doesn't let people know. So when I talk to people about the problems with oil and gas and fracking and tar sands, when they know the facts, then they do get concerned and they want to do something. So I think it's our mission to get more people properly informed. I think once they know the facts, and we've seen that happen with people who their own lives are affected by it. They can change overnight. So we need to get more people informed about the facts because we're going to need a lot of people to turn this thing around. Thank you so much for being here today.
And thank you, Molly. Our next speaker has been a noted peace activist in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for a long time. Very active in the Dallas Peace Center. In fact, he will be speaking on behalf of the Dallas Peace Center. That's Hadi Jawad, and he was one of the leaders of the movement, the anti-war movement in Iraq, and addressing the still pressing issues that still linger after the war. Hadi.
Thank you, Gary. The Iraq War was a war for oil in which big oil was the winner. 11 years after the first bombs fell on Baghdad, most U.S.-led coalition forces have left, but Western oil companies have set up shop. Before the 2003 invasion, Iraq's domestic oil industry was nationalized and closed to Western companies. But today, it is largely privatized and dominated by foreign firms. From Exxonmobil and Chevron to BP and Shell, the West's largest firms are firmly established. So are a slew of American oil services companies such as Halliburton, the Texas-based firm Dick Cheney ran before becoming George W. Bush's running mate in the 2000 election. The war is the one and only reason for this long-sought and newly acquired access. Oil was not the only goal of the Iraq War, but it was certainly the central one. Of course, it's about oil, and we can't deny that, said General John Abizaid, former head of the U.S. command in Iraq. In 2007, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan agreed, writing in his memoir, "I am saddened that it is politically inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows. The Iraq War is largely about oil." The Senator and now Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said, "People say we are not fighting for oil. Of course we are." Times are good for oil giants in Iraq right now. Production is up. Profits are soaring. The Wall Street Journal recently wrote, Iraq's oil production surged to the highest level in 30 years last month. Royal Dutch Shell last November signed a $17 billion contract. ExxonMobil, BP, Shell all have multi-billion-dollar contracts, all thanks to the 4,400 American servicemen and women who lost their lives in Iraq and the largest of the American taxpayers. One of our colleagues standing right here at this very press conference in 2008 said, when the Iraq War was being cooked up, ExxonMobil was in the kitchen. The plunder of Iraq continues, just as Iraq continues to boil in ethnic and sectarian strife. Big oil runs everything in America. There is talk about the power of the bankers on Wall Street and the power of the Israeli lobby, but oil is still king. All giants own it all and run it all. ExxonMobil, BP, Shell played the most aggressive role in lobbying their governments to ensure that the invasion of Iraq would result in an Iraq open to foreign oil companies. They succeeded. They're all back in. They're all back in. Heeding the words of Martin Luther King when he said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It is our hope and our prayer, and indeed our dream, that those who caused the pillage and plunder and rape of Iraq will someday be marched before a judge at The Hague 12 months before a judge at The Hague, indicted and convicted, and sent to prison for the rest of their lives. I'd like to end in the words of an Iraqi poet who saw the irony that the oil that was underneath their soil was being pumped out, while the greatest treasure of that nation, its children, were being buried. He says, come and see our overflowing morgues and find our little ones for us. Come search for them in the rubble of your surgical airstrikes. Come see them gathered in garbage dumps looking for food. Come and see. Come.
Thank you, Hadi. Thank you, brother. Our next speaker will be Augusta Ekong, who represents the American Resources for African Culture and Technology. She is from Nigeria, and she will share her story on what has happened in Nigeria due to the actions of ExxonMobil and other oil companies. Thank you.
I'm very happy to that. My name is Augusta Ekong. I'm from Nigeria, Akwa Ibom State. Akwa Ibom is the capital of Uyo, is the state in Uyo, and Akwa Ibom is the headquarters of where ExxonMobile drill. So this issue of ExxonMobile is very important for us. And also I am from the Niger Delta, as you have heard about the crisis in the Niger Delta. So we are going to, I'm a teacher by profession, so I like to bring the child. We are the people from Ibibio. Ibibio is where the human race started, and that is where all the commodities of the world started. All the commodities, corn, pepper, groundnut, oil started. Recorder here, the video people recorder, they didn't put us in the map because we are very small. If they could have put us in the map or in the Bible, they could have killed us. And our people were not that in skill. Actually, we are Irish, we are Scottish, and we are Welsh. And when ExxonMobil, the gas, they drilled the oil in our tribe, when the women were already drilling the oil. And when they came, Shell came and saw we were drilling, and then our men came. Then people, foreigners started coming, and then they named it Shell Oil and ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil and Shell are two brothers and sisters. They work together, and they work, one cannot do without another. But when they came and took over from our people, and then they staged the war of the Biafran War, which you people are famous to be, with the leader of Ujuku, and then everybody, while the war was killing people, the Shell was pumping the oil from the ground. So we really like this rally, because since they came and overthrew the Scottish and the Welsh, which opened her hospital from Glasgow, Scotland, the Notre Dame and the Sisters of Charity. And now, currently, we don't have a good school system. The hospital, you have to buy your medicine to bring to the hospital. There is no bed in the hospital, and the condition is very bad. And the fishing industry, our people are in the coastal, so we do fishing a lot, and the oil is polluting the fish and also cause the infertility. We have a lot of infertility in our tribe, and we need to have that again. And then they pick the politicians. When the politicians, they are the one, Exxon and Shell Oil are the one that elect our politicians, and then the politicians answer to them. Our oil and petroleum department answer to Exxon and Shell Oil. They don't answer to Nigerian government, and then they train their leaders from one family to the other, so that no matter what the good side are talking, nobody's here. So So we have here Mr. Paul Knott. You will Google his name. He's very, very important. He was the one that laid the pipe for Exxon all over the world. Exxon doesn't have, no other country has oil. The first oil is on our soil. Then they pipe it to other parts of the world. What happened is that they refused to pay Nigeria the royalty. For instance, there was a project and gave the Chad 5% and 8% to Cameroon. And when I took Mr. Paul to read the geophysics, Mr. Paul realized that the wells were dry wells, that they were not prosperous, and that becomes a war. So we have to also find combining. He is the shell. It's either combining or not. So they did what ExxonMobil refused to sponsor us. They didn't sponsor our non-profit because they feel that we were trade. But we want Exxon to know, but now we have won. All the minerals rights have been done up to our tribe.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Deborah Beltran with Dallas and Move On.
Hello. I'd like to apologize because I am not a public speaker. I'm a grandma. And I'm here today because every time I look in the face of my 1-year-old granddaughter and my 6-year-old grandson, I realize that they're going to live in a world that will be unable to sustain life. We have to do something now. Are we using hyperbolic language here when we say that ExxonMobil is wanted or they're guilty of crimes against the planet and humanity? I say we're not, and the facts are there. You just need to Google it. Google it. The facts are there. We have to do something. I mean, in 50 years, we may have a planet that cannot sustain life. And we are talking about crimes not only against the planet, we're talking about everywhere ExxonMobil goes, they destabilize the government. They're just an immoral corporation. The money that they've put in to put out false information about climate change alone is immoral. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and please do everything you can do. Join a group, get out, and do whatever you can do. Thank you.
As my mother once said, you don't cross a grandmother. That's a very dangerous thing to do. Our next speaker is the great eco warrior, Aly Tharp of Texas Action Coalition for the Environment.
Nobody knew about the Pegasus pipeline before it ruptured on March 29, 2013. Not even the people who had spent years trying to educate the public about tar sands, about the Keystone XL pipeline in progress. Not even the most dedicated activists knew about the Pegasus pipeline, which was carrying tar sands bitumen from Canada before it erupted on March 29, 2013. And we should ask ourselves why. It's not because people don't care, it's because Exxon profits upon misinformation and discretion of information given to the public. And that's something that we saw in that these houses were built right on top of a pipeline. Exxon benefited from buying a pipeline that was 60 years old, keeping it out of the public eye, and pumping tar sands bitumen through it for years. And so what happened is another instance of misinformation, of lying to the public, and of people being the ones who received all of the damage, all of the harm from that happening. When it spilled, first they said that there were at maximum a few thousand barrels that spilled, and yet the EPA 1 week later said it was more likely twice that amount. So there we go. And again it happened when people who lived in the community were not told to leave. People could smell this spill 3 miles away on the highway. tremendous amount of stench coming from this because it wasn't regular oil that spilled. It was a mix of very heavy bitumen mixed with natural gas condensates or dilutants. And so when Exxon didn't bother to tell anybody that it wasn't just regular oil that spilled, the people who lived in Mayflower and Conrad, the neighboring town, were the ones that had major harm caused to them from this. The first response from the police department, the teleoperator at the police department, actually told people living in the neighborhood that the smell they had in their house was actually an indicator, the same as you would have in a gas spill. It wasn't actually hydrocarbon toxins they were smelling, it was just something to notify you that there was a spill. And they didn't bother to say, because you can smell this, you should leave the area. Only 22 homes were evacuated, when in reality, miles worth of homes should have been notified that they were smelling dangerous, toxic hydrocarbons and evacuated from the area. So we saw that Exxon was more interested in keeping the situation under wraps than they were in actually protecting the public and the people in Mayflower. And that caused major damage. And so now they celebrate, in this building they're celebrating how they cleaned up this spill, when in reality, that is not what happened. And that is not what the people who live there and who can't actually return to their homes witness every day. I actually don't know, and as Molly told us earlier, the public doesn't understand how bad these spills are because it's kept out of our eyes. It's kept out of our conception. We don't really understand because we've never had to go through what the people in Mayflower went through. Waking up every day with splitting headaches, waking up every day with nausea and vomiting and ulcers in our bodies that weren't there before or that are much worse than they were before, and not being able to get any claims out of it because they didn't live in 22 homes that were directly in the line and in the path of this oil. So whereas an entire town and an entire area suffers, not to mention the wildlife and the marshes in this region is suffering, Exxon celebrates the victory that they had in cleaning it up, when really they hired people off of Craigslist and didn't even give them ventilation masks when they were cleaning it up. So let's question what we have going on here in our society, because it is not protecting the public, and we may benefit with cheap gas prices, but we are not benefiting as a society. And everyone is going to feel the heart of this and the hurt of this 50 years from now, 100 years from now, because even today our ecosystems are collapsing, and it won't hold up for much longer.
Everyone move on down a little bit, several steps down. We have to get up the steps. Okay, but we are peaceful.
Everybody's here to say arrest Exxon. We got pictures of Rex Tillerson, one that I like very well, a picture of Rex Tillerson. He's the CEO of Exxon behind bars. He's not getting arrested. They're not getting arrested. And it's an interesting question, why not? We got a lot of jails in Dallas. A lot of them are pretty full. It's pretty easy to get arrested. You can get arrested if you get a traffic ticket and you don't pay it. You can get arrested in Garland or most of the suburbs for possession of a joint. You can get arrested for not paying your taxes. There's a lot of things you can get arrested for. We've heard a little bit about what Exxon has done. We've heard they took part in the Iraq War, that they were part of the reason for the Iraq War. The Iraq War killed millions of people. That's the epidemiological evidence is that the number of deaths attributable to the Iraq War is in the millions. You don't ever hear that. You hear about, what is it, 6,000 to 7,000 American deaths. You don't hear how many Iraqi soldiers were killed, and you sure don't hear about the civilian death toll. But it did in the millions. You heard about what they're doing to the environment. That's another thing that results in deaths. Many years ago, when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister of Great Britain, there's a position in Britain called the Royal Astronomer. That's the chief scientist in Britain. And the fellow who at that time was the Royal Astronomer got in a lot of trouble because he pointed out that even then, global warming had clearly killed more people than terrorism ever did. How has global warming killed people? It's killed people mainly through water. Either through drought or through floods. In Bangladesh, every year they have floods. The number of deaths from that in any given year is in the tens of thousands, and it adds up over time. And it's killed people by causing droughts in places like Africa, places like Northeast Asia. And the numbers there, again, come into the millions. So how is it you can can go to jail in Dallas County if you get a traffic ticket and don't pay it. And Rex Tillerson and his buddies can be involved in all these things which are killing millions of people, and they're never going to see the inside of a prison cell. How is that possible?
The system's corrupt.
You see,
The system is corrupt.
you see all the police around us. There must be a dozen police here to keep an eye on us. Nobody here has broken any law. How many police are there keeping an eye on them? I doubt there is even one single policeman there.
The system is corrupt.
On the Exxon shareholders meeting. I hear people say the system is corrupt. I'm afraid I think it's worse than that. I think the reality is it's their system. It was built to work for them, and it always has worked for them. People say, take our country back, but I say, when was it ours? You can't take back what you never had in the first place. Tell me when this country was ours.
Never.
Was it when it was founded and only white male property owners can vote and black people were treated as property? Was it before, was it in World War I where we went to war for Rockefeller and Morgan? Yeah, we elected, you all may or may not know this story. World War I, 300,000 Americans died. They purchased 100,000 coffins before the war even started. The president that led us into the war was Woodrow Wilson, kind of the Jimmy Carter of his day. He was elected on an anti-war platform. He says, whatever, we're going to war anyway because the financial people had loaned money to England and France, and if they lost, then the financial people wouldn't get their money back. It wasn't our country then, and it isn't our country now. And it's not a matter of taking it back, it's a matter of taking it to begin with. And I'll tell you what the biggest barrier that we face in that is that too many of us think it's our country. Too many of us think it's a free country, it's a democracy. It isn't, and it never has been, or if it is, it's a free country for them, and it's a democracy for them. It's a country where the policies are set according to what they need. Why is there unemployment? Why is there hunger? Why is there homelessness in the richest country in the world? Because that doesn't bother them. That's not a problem for them. Is there really a shortage of houses? Is there really a shortage of food? No, of course there isn't. So how can people be hungry? Because the way the economy is organized doesn't provide those things, and that's okay with them. So it's a matter of undoing it all. It's a matter of making it our country for the first time ever. And that is a very big and very slow process. And the fact of the matter is that Rex Tillerson, in my opinion, will die of old age before justice ever comes for him. And it's the next generation of Rex Tillersons at best that we'll be dealing with. The implications of that are very grim, because the fact of the matter is climate change is accelerating, and the effect on all of us is going to get worse. We feel it every summer. Every summer is hotter than the last anymore, but it's going to get worse in terms of food prices and all the rest, and we're not going to stop it in time to see a lot of that happen. We're going to have to, this is a struggle that's still got a long, long way to go, and we're going to have to be patient and careful and keep it up, and that's the only thing that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. And now, Leslie Harris of Code Pink and my fellow co-conspirator in this action.
Thanks, Gary. I'm not really on the agenda to speak here, but we had a speaker listed, Colonel Ann Wright. She's a retired career Army officer and U.S. diplomat. After that, she was acting ambassador at several embassies, and she helped open the embassy in Afghanistan after we went in. She resigned her post in protest of the invasion of Iraq, the day that we went in. And she has spent her life since then devoting her life to the cause of peace and justice. So she sent me a little statement to read, and I'm going to read it if I can figure out how to work my phone. She was delayed in Hollywood. ExxonMobil has been one of the great beneficiaries of war, especially during the wars on Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, the war on Iraq was instigated in order to get cheap oil for American oil companies from Iraqi oil fields. The U.S. military purchased massive amounts of fossil fuels from ExxonMobil to operate its tanks, armored personnel carriers, and aircraft. Pollution from ExxonMobil products continues to choke the world's environment. And I'm just going to add to that the U.S. Department of Defense is the largest oil-consuming government body in the U.S. and the world. It's time for us to change course and develop renewable energy. Like Deborah Beltran, I am here for my children and for the future. We want everyone to have a sustainable future. So I think I'm the last speaker. Gary has something to say at the end, but I do want to thank the coalition of groups that have come here to help put this on. They are DFW System Change, Not Climate Change. Texas Action Coalition for the Environment. Dallas Move On. Tar Sands Blockade. Code Pink Greater Dallas. Dallas Left Alliance. Veterans for Peace, Chapter 106. Solidarity. Dallas Peace Center. Corpus Christi, Dallas. Fort Worth Move On Council. And Hope for Peace and Justice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Gary.
Thank you, and thank all of you. Well, we're getting ready for our main action, which is, we say, arrest Exxon. And we might as well say ExxonMobil, too. Now we do have a posse here. Oh! Okay, sorry about that. There's prayer. So, Reverend Diane Baker.
My name is Reverend Diane Baker, D-I-A-N-E-B-A-K-E-R. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to pray from my heart, from your heart. Bless each of you for being here, for standing here. We stand here because we want to inspire our children, inspire each other, inspire those who stand against us. Inspire those who are with ExxonMobil. I stand here for the children of our world. I stand here and ask that we educate ourselves. We come here not just to stand and hold a sign, but to educate ourselves, others, and our children. And lastly, with my heart, I know that each of us at one time will begin and take a step and move and be challenged. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay. Now, we had talked about, I think, a thing called Arrest Exxon. And we have a posse. We have a posse here. But I have to give them something to show that there is a reason to arrest ExxonMobil, to arrest their CEO and the heads of their industry. And I have here a list. And of course, it's not the complete list. If I had tried to do it, I would still be doing this for 20 years. Could I have some assistance, please, in rolling this out? These are some of the documented crimes that ExxonMobil has committed. for several decades from the Exxon Valdez, which the effects are still being felt and will be felt for generations, all the way down to what our friend Aly talked about in the Mayflower, Arkansas, with the Pegasus line, which also goes through Texas, and which are numerous sites on the pipe that are extremely lines or hells have been destroyed by fracking, and now tar sands because of the numerous tar sand spills, and now we have bombs